I've had beatings to the point of unconsciousness, one woman told me, describing her child abuse from many years ago. Ripped, broken arms taken out of the socket, and that compares nothing. Doesn't even begin to be the pain that became every day, just right here. She pointed to her chest. This thing that wouldn't come off, that made it hard to breathe. Like I would rather have hours and hours of people beating me up than have been where I was inside. It hurt that bad. There were times I thought it would kill me, all on its own, that I wouldn't have to do anything. She's describing depression here. One of the interviews I did during my dissertation research in Utah and Illinois, trying to understand the long-term experience of people taking antidepressants. And this was my main conclusion of the whole study. Depression hurts really bad. And what I found in the interviews most interesting is on top of the pain of depression itself, people seem to be carrying a certain story about depression that weighed them down further. I was going to title my presentation, "The Depressing Story We Keep Telling People with Depression and How It Makes Depression Worse." I thought that might be a little depressing as a title. Nobody might show up. But it's really not a joke how many examples there are of commentaries, language, assumptions about mental health and mental illness, depression, anxiety that are fairly heavy. I asked one person, "Do you ever talk about getting better from depression?" She said, "I don't think that's possible. I want to, but I don't think, just a couple of years ago, I just faced it that I'm always going to have something." I asked her, "Who told you you don't get better?" "Well, my initial diagnosis, they said this is something permanent. This isn't something you'll ever not have." So I would describe the story that I observed weighing on people as involving three parts. The first part is your body, your brain is different than other brains. It's deficient in a pretty fundamental way. Number two, because of that, this is a problem that will likely be lifelong for you. I've heard that over and over and over in stories. And number three, because it's a lifelong problem, we'll need to do something for the rest of your life to try to make it manageable and make it go away. That's the story that most people, probably 95% of people facing depression and other serious challenges, carry around. One young woman, about 25 years old, told me that her suicidal thoughts started the same day her doctor told her that her depression would be lifelong. Now, that doctor was not trying to make this woman feel worse. He was trying to share what he understood to be the case. And if research confirmed that those three ideas are true, I also would say we need to share them. Even if it's bad news, even if it's hard to accept, we need to let people know about the reality of this chronic, debilitating brain disorder. If the research showed that to be the case, we should tell people. But as Tom hinted in the beginning session, brain scientists now know this. I've never talked to a brain scientist that didn't believe this, the malleability and the changeability of the brain. However, when you talk to normal people, they haven't quite caught up. We haven't quite caught up to the research. This is how most people I interview still speak about the underlying biology of depression, of schizophrenia, of anything. But we know very clearly that learning the language leads to brain changes. Cognitive behavioral therapy leads to brain changes. Meditation practice leads to brain changes. So does child abuse. Trauma has an enduring effect on the body, but not a permanent one. The brain continues to change. I teach an 8-week meditation course, and they've done brain scan studies of just 8 weeks of meditation showing changes in the white matter and the gray matter, just in 8 weeks of making 30 minutes of stillness and silence. It's also a new discovery that genetics are not just a permanent blueprint that gets laid down. But here's an example from a cancer research study that shows genes turning on and off depending on what we do. One Nobel Prize winner called it the fluid genome. Again, most people really haven't heard about this. So rather than asking, is it biological or not, I'd suggest we ask, how are mental and emotional conditions biological? Highly recommend this book. He gathers all of the evidence confirming that people with depression have inflammation. I'm going to get away from that. People who have depression have inflammation throughout the body and the brain, much like the flu. You see inflammation. That is going on. You see higher levels of stress, cortisol in the brain pushing people into depression. So there are complex physiological things going on still. I would suggest that we stop telling people that an enduring deficiency underlies their emotional mental distress when most scientists have rejected that hypothesis, and start helping people understand what most neuroscientists and genetics researchers now teach about the brain and the body. When you talk to others about this, I would discourage you against ragging on the chemical imbalance theory. I would say something like, yeah, there's definitely something biological happen, but it's more complex than we realize, because that's the truth. We've moved on. Science has continued to move on. A second area of research that is hopeful is that people who face serious mental and emotional challenges have unique depth and sensitivity. There's actually evidence that women who struggle with eating disorders have higher levels of heightened emotional acuity. Homer Simpson doesn't get depressed, but these people do. They're the people in my life who have inspired my work. Only one of them is still alive. They are among the most beautiful people I know, and they've all struggled. I would suggest that to these many beautiful people that we know, many of you, that we stop telling them that they're fundamentally deficient and that this is who they are, and instead invite them to consider a language of facing something, fighting something. When my brother had cancer, we didn't say, you are lymphoma. We said, you're facing something really hard. We're going to rally around you. We're going to help you. It was something that they were experiencing. That's another little change we could make that may make a difference. A third area of hopeful research that is often not acknowledged is how many risk factors are established in the medical literature. I used to teach this in the depression and recovery course, and a woman came up to me, and at the end of the class she said, I have 9 risk factors for depression. She was excited, because for the first time in a decade of facing depression, she understood, like, there's a lot going into this. Things that I have some say over, like my sleep and my stress and how much sunlight I'm getting and the diet that I eat. This may or may not be surprising to you, but this isn't super great for mental health, not for kids, not for adults, but it is what we're consuming a lot of. We've surveyed 3,000 studies of ADHD risk factors, and here are the 20 areas. We sorted them out, and here are the 20 areas. I like to tell parents of children with ADHD, there's a lot you can do in your own home. You can make adjustments to all these different areas and help move your child's attentiveness over time in a new direction. I've taught meditation classes to teenagers, and we've measured pre and post, comparing with the control group, and you see their attentiveness shifting in 8 weeks, gradually. So, I would suggest that we stop telling people facing serious mental and emotional problems that there's Nothing in your life has caused this. I know that's very popular to say. It's like we don't want anybody to feel bad, but it's not actually true. The medical research shows there's many, many things that contribute to this. And let's help people know that without shaming and making them feel bad. It actually helps people feel good to know that there's a lot I can do. So this is kind of how I describe it to people. Now, if there's a lot that contributes to mental and emotional problems, the additional good news is there's a lot we can do about it. This is Dr. Kelly Turner. She has done 1,500 interviews with people who recovered from cancer when they weren't supposed to. The medical community calls these spontaneous remissions because we can't really explain them. However, she has found 70 different patterns across cancer remission. And you can read about it online. These are the 9 things that show up with everyone. Everyone that got better from cancer, who wasn't supposed to, had these 9 things. As you can see, there's 2 physical, and the rest are related to mental, emotional, how they're relating to the world and each other. I'm going to tell you, you go to this documentary, you'll hear her talk about this at length. It's fantastic. It's worth $3 on YouTube, trust me. Heal. So I'd suggest that we stop promoting single interventions, whether it's gratitude journals, willpower, meditation, or medication, as the answer to emotional problems, and instead start making more space for people to explore the large variety, the stunning variety of healing supports available to make a plan right for them. If we could do this, I think it would make a big difference. This is kind of how I describe it. Let's look at anything out there and find what makes sense for you. I was working with a 17-year-old with depression, and he's like, I'm not going to change my diet, but I'll get outside. So he made a plan to go outside and just get more sunlight. And after 2 weeks, he's like, all right, I'll start looking at making some adjustments to my diet. So it's a growing, unfolding momentum in a positive direction. This is another great book, The Upward Spiral, written by a neuroscientist, and he makes very clear that even small changes in our lifestyle can lead to rippling effects in the brain that permit other effects. And so you get outside more, and then you have more energy to start connecting with people, and it unfolds in a really hopeful way, right? What if we approached people with serious mental and emotional challenges with this? Okay, what is it in your life that we can start? Where's the point at which we can start to get some more positive momentum? Let's just focus. I interviewed a guy in Chicago who said he knew his recipe for madness. He said, when I lose my sleep because I'm working so hard, I know what's coming next. And so for him, if he sees early signs of that, he drops everything and gets his sleep-wake cycle restored. He rests. That is and that starts the protective cycle again. It's going to be different for everyone. We all have different kind of vulnerabilities. Number 5, the benefits of being still, making more time for silence and space in your life. Woman writes, nothing worked for my depression until I tried meditation. This is not something many people try, but research has shown it cuts relapse from depression in half for those who actually practice systematically with help doing this. Now, it's easier said than done, right? Here is another quote from somebody who experienced acute depression. Anyone recognize this? For those Christians in the audience, this is various translations of the Savior entering the Garden of Gethsemane. It reads exactly like my interviews. He was overwhelmed. He didn't want to experience what he was experiencing, and he even articulated, I don't want this. I'd rather it just go away. But as you know, he went through something, and when he reached out, what he asked people around him was not make this go away. His request to others was watch with me, just be with me. I was helping a woman, a neighbor of mine who was struggling with depression, and I was trying to help her feel good. I was telling her jokes. And she said, stop, Jacob. I just need you to be here, not try to make this go away. That's another way that we can help people, is just being with them, rather than being in a state of crisis trying to make it go away. Peter Bregan says, rather than treating this like a crisis, let's treat it like an opportunity, kind of an adventure. This is an opportunity to learn something. I wanted to point out this open dialogue approach. In Finland, in the Lapland's area of Finland, when somebody falls into a psychotic state, they've experimented with surrounding them with community. They call up everyone in their network and they say, Bill needs you right now. He needs you to be around more than usual. And it's a very systematic, therapy-directed effort. They find that nearly 60% of people have their psychosis pass without intervention medically to make it pass. For those who don't, they give them a small dose of antipsychotic drug to kind of help. But this is an example of the kind of community-based approach we could consider as well locally. Okay, so if this hopeful research is legitimate, why haven't we heard about it? Because of this. Now, I would just ask, what are the two things all these organizations have in common? Number one, they are the go-to source of information. WebMD has something like 18 million views a month, and every article you ever read about mental health in Utah will have NAMI on it, right? In 2012, Senator Charles Grassley forced nonprofits to disclose their funding sources because of some concerns. 3 out of every $4 in NAMI's budget was coming from pharmaceutical companies. And WebMD was created by Eli Lilly. The makers of Prozac created WebMD. Now, this is not to get into these conspiracy theories, right? This is what we think about with conspiracy. It's just a reality that funding for these organizations is largely coming from pharmaceutical companies. I know because I have a nonprofit and we don't have the funds they do to promote our message. It is possible to get funding from industry and do high-quality education. It really is. And I have worked with NAMI. They're many wonderful people, many wonderful volunteers, and they do a lot of great work. However, it is also the case that funding kind of influences things. So NAMI's manual to educate people mentions brain changeability once in the manual that I reviewed, and it mentions it as a controversial theory, and a large part of it is about helping educate people on the kinds of medications. So this does play a role. We need to be aware of this. And I would argue that we need to stop allowing pharma-funded organizations to educate us about mental health. I don't have a problem with drugs, but I don't want the drug makers to influence our education as much as they have. There's a lot of other people we could be listening to that don't get the attention of those organizations. Trust me, they do not. So, with the time I have left, I'd like to propose, since we're here at this conference together and we're going to be spending time, this is my proposal at the conference. I'd love to see a sustainable healing initiative that involves diverse talents and interests coming together. We do this together and we figure it out. I'd like to follow up people and find out how they do long term. And I'd like to review 10, I just have 7 minutes, I'd like to review 10 resources that I'd love to see flower in our home state and across our nation. First one is open dialogue. I mentioned it, this Finnish approach. There is a training in April 24th. If there are any professional therapists here that want to help start the open dialogue efforts in Utah, it's in New York. It's about $1,000 to go. Rocky Mountain Hearing Voices Network. I was trained by the leaders of the Hearing Voice Network. This started in Europe. It's a mindfulness-based approach to schizophrenia. So people come together, and if you hear voices or have auditory hallucinations, you come together and just share without judgment, without labeling them. It's a safe space to just share, and what they have found, and there's a research project underway, is that the voices start to become less kind of intrusive, and you start to learn to relate to the voices, kind of like Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, those of you who've seen that movie. You can learn that, and this is a group that helps that happen. We're starting this in Utah this month. The planning meeting is set. It will be an online meeting. If you know someone who would like to participate, I'll share my email at the end. This will be an ongoing resource, a weekly meeting for people to experience this. Number 3, mindfulness-based classes. The Davis Center for Mindfulness has classes in the northern area, and then mindfulnessutah.com has a whole slate of classes. There's many mindfulness-based cognitive therapists as well. These are great. Emotions Anonymous. It's actually a 12-step group where you acknowledge, hey, I'm kind of stuck. I need a higher power. It's beautiful. I've participated in these meetings, and if you'd like to be a part of helping that expand, talk to me. We don't have enough people involved leading that out. Exercise programs. In Great Britain, they prescribe exercise for mild to moderate depression. We did a pilot study with 20 people in the northern Utah region, and it's fantastic. Long-term benefits. Short-term, it competes with medication without side effects. I'd love to find a way to help more physical therapists and exercise trainers get involved in helping this happen as an option for prescribers. The Nedley Depression Recovery Program. Maria and Ed, would you stand up? This is a wonderful workshop that Maria teaches. Where are you, Maria? Over there, and Ed. And they have incredible results. The majority of people who go through the Nedley Depression Recovery Program and make the changes across all the areas find their depression lifting for good. Now that sounds unbelievable, because it is. People don't actually believe that anymore. Talk to Maria or Ed if you'd like to know about upcoming classes, and you can go to their website as well, Nedley Depression Recovery. There are also online tools. Clay will be talking about these tomorrow, but joinlift.com is a new app with free support for depression and anxiety that we helped develop. There's a recovery suite for clinicians to get data from the people who are their clients take on these apps. So Clay will say a lot more about that tomorrow. This is a lot to take in, and what we've learned is some people need a little bit more hand-holding. So I live in a place called Paradise, Utah, 3 minutes from a retreat center. And we're planning some 2 to 3-day retreats where people can come and actually do the antidepressant diet, learn how to make mood-boosting foods, and the kind of exercise that's helpful. And they would leave creating their own plan. A large portion of it would be mindfulness training. And the goal would be sending them home with their own plan as a family or as individuals to find more long-term healing. UCLA has done research showing that for diagnosed cases of ADHD, an 8-week mindfulness program can help with attention. And wouldn't that be great to have as an option for parents who are struggling and for adults? If you know someone who'd be interested in training, talk to me. And the Withdrawal Project. Laura Delano spent many, many years on medication and was always told, this is just what you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. The long-term research on medication is showing that's not such a great idea, and that at some point it can be helpful for some people to taper off. I've interviewed people who come alive when they taper off, similar to when they started. They start medications and they kind of feel more themselves. When they get off, after the effects have kind of run their course, they feel better. There are thoughtful ways to do that minimize side effects, and we'd love to see more support as well for that. This should be done with proper supervision, because when dosages are changed, that is a time of heightened suicidality. So this needs to be a very careful support. So I'd love to hear from individuals who have done everything and they still haven't quite found the recovery they need. I'd love to talk to family members and also clinicians who would like to partner in helping promote some of these resources. I'd love to see resources that help people who are looking for deeper and more lasting healing. So I was at a conference, a religious mental health conference, and the speaker got up and said, one day in the resurrection, this will all be better. Now, I've lost my brother to cancer, and his fiance to depression, anxiety, eventually took her life. I look forward to the resurrection. I really do. That's our big family reunion. But when I heard him point us all towards the resurrection, I felt a little sick to my stomach. Because in that moment, I had a really clear sense that it doesn't all have to wait for the resurrection. There is more we can do right now to help invite and cultivate and promote, in gentle ways, long-term, deeper healing. And I would love to see this conference, this conversation at this conference, help encourage that in our community and wherever you're going home to. Joseph Smith wrote, "Dearly beloved brethren and sisters, let us cheerfully do all that lies in our power, and then may we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God for his arm to be revealed." I get discouraged in this work all the time. This is my hope. My hope is if we do what we can cheerfully, I believe the Lord's arm will be revealed to deliver his people, to deliver people who are seeking deliverance. Thank you.